I have three, there's links to three different BRAT projects. So we've got the lower tongue, which is from our friends in Miles City here, and there's a data set there. The links to these are also, if I go back to the web page here, they're also in this under optional. And then there is down at the bottom here the explanation of what those three are. Okay, so I'll put those in the chat real quick. I can find the chat. And so we've got the lower tongue, so an Eastern Montana example. We've got this one from Central Montana, which is Box Elder, and this actually corresponds to where we did the field work for Roy in the Lewiston classroom. And then we have, whoops, I went wrong way. And then we have one for the Ruby watershed in Western Montana. We could go to lots of other places, of course, but these are just some Huck-8s. Now, it is nice, like Montana Natural Heritage has, to have that, you know, kind of wall-to-wall coverage, and you can go anywhere in the state, etc. This platform that we're looking at is meant to view how the projects, if you were to go download them, are packaged up. And we tend to package them up in Huck-8s because they tend to be more manageable file sizes. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take you to this Central Montana example. Okay, so you don't have to do anything. You can just watch my screen for here for this little step. So the first thing that comes up when we're in here, it's similar to what we were looking at in the Montana Natural Heritage. It is this existing capacity. And so what that's showing us is the existing dam capacity. You can right click on any of the layers right now. There is not great English metadata on these in here, but that you'll see that start changing in the future. But you can see a little bit of information on that. It's showing up over here, and it's also got a hillshade. Now, any of these layers you can turn off. So if you want to see it with the base map underneath, you can turn off that hillshade, and we can zoom in to a particular reach, you know, and get a feel for what we're looking at. A couple of things I want you to note. One is, as you zoom in, if you zoom in too far, oh, that isn't going to happen for here. Let me put on something. I'm going to put on a DEM. If you zoom in past how this is getting displayed, there's a little warning. And this warning is basically telling us that what we're looking at in this web viewer isn't necessarily as full resolution as what the data is if you were to download it. And so that's just important to point out, that when you are looking at stuff in here, some of these, you know, in order to sort of work across the web, are not necessarily the full resolution. Now, the other thing that I want to point out while we're just looking at existing capacity to start is, see how I've got all these little sort of stray pieces? Where are they? Pretty much all on reservoirs, okay? And one of the reasons that we have these projects packaged like this is arguably the Montana Natural Heritage site is a nice example of a good way to package up the outputs, and if that's all you're going to look at it. But if you zoom into your favorite pixel and you find something and you're not sure and you want to dig a little bit deeper, that's where having this project view is helpful. So if I want to go in and say, well, what were the inputs this was based off of? So I'm going to load, I just loaded the network from the inputs. I'm going to turn off capacity so I can see that. And so you can see there's these blue. I might actually change my base map imagery so this pops out a little bit more. Dun, dun, dun. Hello. There we go. Oh, well, the green's really hard to see, but you see these reds, they are popping, right? Those are artificial paths. So this is the input network that was used, and it's showing the F codes from NHD. Now, in principle, you could provide a curated network, a different network, right? But when I'm trying to understand, well, why is it that when I'm looking at this, I'm going to switch it back to satellite imagery, forgive me. Why is it that when I'm looking at my dam capacity, I see all these little arbitrary stray lines? And it's because this filtered view is including artificial paths, which are across the reservoir. And artificial paths are important. We'll see if this is a big enough system. So I just added the river polygons. And we'll probably have to zoom down to the bottom of this to get any, if there are any now. So this one isn't big enough to have it. See, if I was over in this neighboring watershed, I would have river polygons. So artificial paths are what NHD codes for those big traced polygon systems, but it's also what it codes when you're going across a water body. And so if I turn on this water body, you'll see that all of these little reservoirs and those places where I was getting those little answers, that's what's happening there. And so this was one of the questions that you guys brought up. It's like, well, how come it's showing this and not showing that? Now, do you see this little folder here? This is capacity for the entire network. It's almost certainly an overestimate. So this filtered view, so you don't get too carried away, is just of what's mapped as perennial and these artificial paths. If I add in the same layer, this is going to be maybe similar to that provisional that some of you mentioned, where it was run for the entire network or run for a more expansive selection of the network. And so we're not, in this case, turning that on by default because it tends to get you a little too excited about where Beaver could be. However, for some of the examples where, you know, maybe some of these, it does have a more reliable water source. If I turn off that all, see all of these areas, like this is a creek that I can actually see water in, but it's not showing up based off of that restrictive filter. And so it is here, it's buried. And that's a really important thing to highlight, where you can go to dig to find that. People tracking what we're talking about here. This is basically the first question you had. I mean, BRAT is trying to use free data in this case, okay, to look at what capacity is, and it needs to know where is your channel network, what portion of the network are you going to use that you're going to assume are wet. So we actually run it on everything, but we don't necessarily want to show everything right out of the gates. But for those of you in Eastern Montana, that could be an issue. Questions? Are we okay? Right. I do also want to contrast. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to like reiterate, so what's on the Heritage Program server is kind of a toned down or filtered version of the total data set. It was what they felt they could store in their existing capacity on their server. We had discussions about having intermediaries and other layers, and it ended up being, you know, what you see there is the end result of those discussions, but it's not everything. And if you do want to see everything and go through the process, here's the place to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Also, we should point out that the runs that we're showing here, we are working on trying to get Montana Natural Heritage's data into this system. We're not sure how that's going to go, so we're trying it. So it would reveal the same stuff. The information is there in the data that you can download from them, but it is a different run, okay? And so another thing that I wanted to highlight, some of you were asking about some of the other attributes. So basically the things with I's were inputs, and then there were, you know, the O's are the outputs, and there's, well, some of the I's are inputs, some of them are intermediates, okay? And so there are, if you want to go back and look at like, okay, well, what is this based off of? You know, we're going to be sampling next to these lines, this land fire vegetation data. So this is an EVT class, okay? The same data, you can get broken out into all these ridiculous categories of vegetation communities. Or if I turn that vegetation type off, we have a, sort of dumbed down, just show me what's riparian, okay? And so this is this existing, what's being mapped as riparian here. So notice that, some of the areas where we're seeing more riparian species, we're seeing more blue and green. And then some of the areas where we're seeing less, we're seeing yellow, okay? So these inputs and being able to browse around and kind of unpack, am I getting the right answer for the right reasons or the wrong? This is where the curious person goes to try to dig that a little deeper there, okay? So I'm gonna switch back to the slides. Are there, and I'm gonna walk us through, when we break back out into groups, you guys can do some things on any of those three places.